All right, so just kind of recap where we left off. Obviously, I had a day off yesterday, so kind of get your minds back into what we're talking about. Was the Articles of Confederation, okay? I gave you notes over the weaknesses of, that was kind of the last thing. No executive branch, no judicial branch, could not enforce laws, could not tax, could not settle disputes between the states, okay? And so I mentioned that this book by Hamilton, that's used for the play, the musical Hamilton, comes from this book we're unsure now. I have a couple of paragraphs I want to read to you about. We were also going to read about Shays' Rebellion before I was interrupted by the bell. I believe that was the case. So page 40 in your book, we're gonna look over this. I apologize, guys. Some of this, I'm going to do some reading in class. If you can, kind of stay with it and follow along. This is kind of driving home the point of why these Articles of Confederation failed, but also some of the opinions here by some of the founders, like Jefferson, are kind of important to keep an eye on as we move forward here. So we're not done with the Articles, but we're realizing how bad things are under the Articles. Okay, so before I get into reading from Hamilton, let's talk about Hamilton for a minute. Okay, does anybody know where he was born? Where? In the Caribbean, in the Virgin Islands. Okay. Does anybody know anything about his mother and father? Okay. Well, his mother was native. His father was from Scotland that came to the Virgin Islands, had relations with this woman, his mother, and then left. So I don't even know if he knew he had a son. Okay. He was what you would call a bastard child. Okay. But a very smart one. And so Hamilton is kind of a mixed breed, okay? And he doesn't have a father. So if you go back to the 1700s, guys, if you didn't have a father, you were looked at differently. I mean, this term bastard meant something back then, okay? And so the cards are kind of stacked against you. But he's a very smart young man. He goes to work for this guy that runs a big shipping company in the Virgin Islands. Now, what kind of stuff are they shipping in the Virgin Islands? What kind of imports, exports are we looking at here? Especially exports. The imports would be maybe some food, but slaves. Okay. Any of you guys been to the Caribbean? Like on a cruise or something like that? You have? Yeah. Okay. So we did a cruise once, my wife and I, and we were on the island of Nevis. Okay. And the tour guide or somebody told us that island over there that you could see from Nevis was a slave island. Okay. And so when they were bringing slaves across from Africa, a lot of times they'd start in the Caribbean and then they would be moved up into the Americas. Okay. And so a lot of slaves coming in, sugar, molasses, these sorts of things are being exported out of the Virgin Islands, Caribbean. And so Hamilton worked for this shipping magnate. And by the age of 13, he pretty well knew the business, and the guy that ran the business wanted to go to Europe for 6 months, and he left this shipping company in the hands of a 13-year-old. When he got back from Europe, the company was being run better than when he left. And so Alexander Hamilton was actually sponsored by some businessmen there to come to the States to study law. And so he's like 15. He comes to the States, and he shows up at William and Mary to go to college. Now, guys, in order to study law, you got to take all these classes, and then you have to do an apprenticeship and so forth to become a lawyer. And Hamilton's like, I don't I don't have time for that. Just give me the books. So he gets all the law books. He reads them. 6 months later, he comes back and passes the bar. Okay, we are talking about the smartest guy in the room. Okay, and so he becomes a young lawyer. The American Revolution breaks out, and he joins the Continental Army. He reads some books on artillery. Okay, and so he goes to the artillery part of the Continental Army, and he's showing everybody what to do. And quickly, his name is brought to George Washington, who's the commander-in-chief. So he meets Hamilton. This relationship that Hamilton and Washington have will change the course of history because Hamilton becomes his protege. Similarly, Jefferson has a protege. Now, where's Jefferson from? Virginia, okay? Now, when we win the American Revolution, where does Jefferson go? He goes to France. He's going to be like our ambassador to France, okay? And he also takes with him, now his wife has passed away, Jefferson's wife has passed away. So he takes with him one of his slaves. He has a daughter, so the slave will go along to help take care of his daughter. Who's that slave? Sally Hemings. Okay? She's a very fair-skinned slave. She's a half. Okay? Because she is the offspring of Jefferson's uncle and one of his slaves. So she's a fair-skinned slave. She goes with Jefferson to France. Okay? So during the Constitutional Convention, during all this time period that we're going to be talking about, Jefferson is not in the country. He's not at the Constitutional Convention. He doesn't write the Constitution. He's in France. Okay? And while he's in France, he is going to have relations with Sally Hemings, the slave. And they will bear multiple children. Okay? Who now are, mom is half, and now those kids are like even whiter. Okay? They could actually pass as white. But there is a descendants of Thomas Jefferson that are African Americans. Okay, some of you probably knew that, some may not have. Okay, so Jefferson's going to be in the middle of this with some of the letters that we're going to read today. But Jefferson's relationship with James Madison, who's also a younger guy, is very important here because Hamilton and Madison are key players here. When we start talking about the Constitution and the Constitutional Convention, they're very important. And so the relationships with these older men, okay, and powerful men mean something. So that bears mentioning, okay? So in this book, this biography of Hamilton, they're talking about the road to the Constitutional Convention, getting rid of the Articles of Confederation. Let me actually start with Shays' Rebellion. Okay, so on page 40. So Shays was born in Massachusetts. He got this sword from French General Lafayette, sold it. Okay, he got criticized for that. He says, all right, screw it. I'm going to leave the army. So he leaves the army. Afterwards, he settles in Pelham, Massachusetts. In 1786, 87, Shays was one of the leaders of an armed uprising in Massachusetts caused mainly by excessive land taxation, high legal costs, and an economic depression following the American Revolution. The uprising became known as Shays' Rebellion. The insurgents, now this is important, the insurgents were mostly poor farmers who were threatened with loss of property and imprisonment for debt. So, one of the main reasons for the revolution was taxation. Massachusetts starts taxing its people, these poor farmers, they can't pay their taxes, and when they can't pay their debt, they're putting them in jail. Now, in this country, guys, if you cannot pay your mortgage or your car payment, you go to jail if you can't pay your bills. No. They foreclose on your house. The repo man comes and takes your car because you don't own it yet. Yes? You don't go to jail. So do these farmers, these poor farmers, have a righteous reason for rebelling. Yeah, they have a very good reason for doing so. So they demanded, now this is interesting, they demanded protective legislation, the abolition of the Court of Common Pleas, and a radical reduction in taxes. 1786, armed mobs prevented the sitting of the courts of Northampton, Worcester, Great Barrington, and Concord. So they're trying to put people on trial for not paying their debts, and then they're like, we're not going to even let you hold these trials. So armed mobs show up at the courthouse. You're not going to prosecute these people. Okay? They're pissed. So, then 800 followers broke up a session of the state Supreme Court in Springfield while attempting to seize the federal arsenal in Springfield. What? These farmers need weapons. So they go after the federal arsenal. You guys remember John Brown from the Civil War, Harper's Ferry, where he tried to take the federal arsenal? Same stuff right here. John Brown knew history. He's like, I'm going to do what these people are doing right here. Okay, here we go. All right, now, Shays and his men are repulsed by state militia in January 1787. The rebels flee towards Petersham, where they are finally defeated. Now, most of the men were pardoned later in the year. Shays was condemned to death, escaped to Vermont, and was pardoned a year later. Okay, are you awake? Okay, when I read this, there are certain comparisons coming into my brain right now. Like January of 2021, January 6, 2021. Did that pop in anybody's head, or are we not there? We don't have our thinking caps on right now. We're not engaged. What happened? A bunch of people were pissed off. They thought the election got stolen, right? They had a peaceful protest, and then it went to the Capitol, and it got violent. Yes? Did they bring guns into the Capitol and start shooting people? Did anybody die? One of the protesters was shot in the neck. Ashley Babbitt. Okay? Were there officers injured? Yes. Dozens of officers were injured. Okay? And then one of the officers had a heart attack like 2 days later, or a stroke, and died. Okay? Was it a result of this? I don't know. Okay? Now, and then one committed suicide a couple weeks later. So when they say, Capitol police officers died, well, okay, there's a caveat to that. Now, these men were all pardoned, including Daniel Shay, the leader, and they had guns. And they tried to take more guns. What's happening to the January 6th protesters? Are they being pardoned? No. They're being prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. These are your grandparents. Like a lot of these people that went into the Capitol, they were like, oh, it's open. And they just walked in. There's video of it. There's hundreds of hours of video of this. Different cameras all over the Capitol. Okay? A lot of these people were just walking through. And it's kind of funny to watch because they have when they put up the rails where you walk at the airport when you go through the turn, people are like staying in between the thing. It's like, they're walking around. And the FBI is tracking them down one by one. They're still finding these people. And they're arresting them to this day. Many of them were put in solitary confinement for months. Okay? They don't tell that story. Okay? Now, if you went into the Capitol, you were trespassing, you broke the law, and you should be punished for that. Okay? If you assaulted a Capitol police officer, you should be punished for that. Okay? But how much? See, guys, we have a long history in this country of protest. In fact, this country was started with it. We just talked about it. The Boston Tea Party. The protest. These freaking guys that rebelled against the government, they're all treasonous. They're revolutionaries. They went after the government, okay? And they had to fight a war, okay? But it's interesting to look at this, okay? So are you on page 40? This is a couple of letters. Now, the bottom one here says a letter from Thomas Jefferson, to William Stephen Smith, who is John Adams' son-in-law. So remember we watched the one episode of John Adams, his daughter, they called her Nabby. This is her husband, okay, when she grew up. And Jefferson's getting these reports of all these problems in the states. And this is how Jefferson replies to it. What country ever before existed a century and a half without a rebellion? And what country can preserve its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The remedy is to set them right as to facts, pardon and pacify them. What signify a few lives lost in a century or two? The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure. Somebody tell me what Jefferson is saying here. Yeah, they work for us, right? Yeah. And sometimes we got to remind them of that, right? We do this with protests. Let's go back to the Black Lives Matter protests or the George Floyd protests. Is it illegal to go out on an interstate highway, say I-70 in St. Louis, and block that highway and stop all the traffic on the interstate I-70? Is that illegal? Yes, of course it's illegal. Okay, so did they arrest those people? If they did, guess what? They were out the next morning. And then most of these people were never charged with any crime. They just let them out. And listen, people were angry. People were mad. They felt like black people were being shot, unarmed black people being shot by white cops. Killed by white cops. This is the narrative of the protests. Okay? Whether you believe that's the case or not, whether you look at the statistics or not, that's what people felt. And so they wanted to let the government know. We're pissed. You understand? And we have to allow for that in this country. We're not going to put these people in jail for freaking 3 years for blocking the highway. It's a peaceful protest. It's civil disobedience. Now, when you start looting and burning down businesses and this sort of thing, that's different. Start hurting people, that's different. And their property. Okay? So this is why we really do promote that peaceful protest. Okay? If it turns violent, gotta knock them down a little bit, but you're not going to overpunish them. Because people need to be able to blow off steam, guys. Okay? And we've kind of forgotten that. Well, I guess it depends on who's doing the protesting. Okay? And if you guys have paid attention a little bit to what's happened to pro-life abortion protesters, okay, they have some really strict laws now. So if you ever go do a protest at an abortion clinic and you violate the law, they're going to throw the book at you. I mean it. They're going to throw the book at you. They're going to put you in jail. Now, if you follow all the rules and you stay on public property, okay, you're okay. You're within your First Amendment rights. But if you prevent somebody from getting access to that abortion clinic, they're going to bring the U.S. Department of Justice down on you. Now, that's with the Biden administration. Now, they could, maybe soften that up a little bit if it's, a pro-life president, okay, directed Justice Department, Attorney General is appointed by the President. They're the ones that enforce the law. Okay, but I can tell you this, Merrick Garland, the current Attorney General, is throwing the book at abortion protesters. Okay? So you got to follow the rules. So I'm just trying to make this point, guys. Okay? Turn to page 41. This is always a tough lecture because I lose students, but I think the message is very important. Okay? So then Thomas Jefferson gets a letter from James Madison, his little protege back in the States, and Madison's worried. He's like, this isn't working, bad stuff is going on. Jay's rebellion, this other stuff. So again, Jefferson replies to Madison. I am impatient to learn your sentiments on the late troubles of the Eastern states. So far as I have yet seen, they do not appear to threaten serious consequences. Those states have suffered from a stoppage of their channels of commerce, which have not found other issues, must render money scarce and make people uneasy. I hold it that a little rebellion now and then is a good thing, and is as necessary in the political world as storms in the physical. Unsuccessful rebellions indeed generally establish encroachments on the rights of the people which have produced them. An observation of this truth should render honest Republican governors so mild in their punishments of rebellions as to not to discourage them too much. It is a medicine necessary for the sound health of government. Okay? And that's just what I was talking about. Now, have you ever read George Washington? You ever read a letter by George Washington? You've ever read one of his farewell address is amazing. Okay, his inaugural addresses are amazing. George Washington's are. This is the father of our country. Now, unlike Madison and Hamilton, this is a soldier. Okay, he doesn't have the brilliance of a Madison or a Hamilton. He's an average Joe. Okay, so this is what an average Joe writes like in the 1780s. Okay, so I challenge you. Be a good writer like this. Okay, this is an average Joe. Okay, now guys, this is a depressing letter. It's just kind of this is father of our country. This is what I told you the other day. He said, Martha, I'll be home by Christmas. And he comes home 8 years later. He has sacrificed much of his life for this cause. And now it's falling apart. Okay? And this is what this letter is about. It's from George Washington to this little man, James Madison. Okay? Let us look to our national character and to things beyond the present period. No morn ever dawned more favorable than our day. No day was ever more clouded than the present! Exclamation point. Wisdom and good examples are necessary at this time to rescue the political machine. What's the political machine? From the impending storm. The new government under the Articles of Confederation. Morning. We're on page 41, last paragraph. Virginia now has an opportunity to set the ladder, and enough of the former, I hope, to take the lead in promoting this great and arduous work. Without some alteration to our political creed, the Articles of Confederation, the superstructure which have been 7 years raising at the expense of much blood and treasure must fall. We are fast verging to anarchy and confusion. A letter which I just received from General Knox, who had returned from Massachusetts, is replete with melancholy information of the temper and designs of a considerable part of that people. Among other things, he says, their creed is this, that the property of the United States has been protected from confiscation of Britain by the joint exertions of all, and therefore ought to be the common property of all. Common property of all. What's that sound like? War. Communism. Okay? And that he attempts opposition to this creed as an enemy of equity, there's that word, equity and justice, and ought to be swept from the face of the earth. again, they are determined to annihilate all debts, public and private, like your student loans, and have agrarian laws which are easily affected by the means of unfounded paper money, which shall be a tender in all cases whatever. Just print it. Then the numbers of these people amount in Massachusetts to about 1/5 of several populous counties, and to them may be collected people of similar sentiments from states of Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire, you know, those independent places, so that they may constitute a body of 12 or 15,000 desperate, unprincipled men. They are chiefly of the young and active part of the community. Turn the page. How melancholy is this? Is the reflection that in so short a space that we have made such large strides towards fulfilling the prediction of our transatlantic foes. Leave them to themselves and their government will soon dissolve. They don't think we can pull this off. We can't start a new country. Will not the wise and good strive hard to avert this evil? Or will their supineness suffer ignorance? In the arts of self-interested, designing, disaffected, and desperate characters to involve this rising empire in wretchedness and contempt? What stronger evidence can be given of the security of man's life? Can be given the security of want of energy of our governments than the disorders. If there exists not a power to check them, what security has a man of life, liberty, or property? Locke. To you, I am sure I need not add aught on this subject. The consequences is here we are. He's describing the articles. The consequences of a lax or inefficient government are too obvious to be dwelt on. 13 sovereignties pulling against each other, all tugging at the federal head, will soon bring ruin on the whole. Whereas a liberal and energetic constitution, well guided and closely watched to prevent encroachments, might restore us to a degree of respectability and consequence to which we had a fair claim and the brightest prospect of attaining. All right, Cliff Notes. This ain't working. We need a stronger constitution. Okay? But when's the last time you read a letter from your founding father of our nation? Okay. All right. So over here, the road. This is from Hamilton's book. Okay. The road to the convention, because we're going to have a constitutional convention, was long and circuitous. Thank you. It began in Mount Vernon in 1785 when commissioners from Maryland and Virginia resolved a heated dispute over the navigation of the Potomac River. Virginia hoped this might set as a pattern for settling other disputes. Guys, we are broke. We are fighting with each other. We need to fix this. So, Madison and Hamilton are going to get together in Annapolis, Maryland, and talk and work out some of these disputes. And this becomes kind of the model for the convention. Okay. Now, I went to Annapolis for my niece's wedding about 4 summers ago. And I looked for this building, and I found it. For Madison and Hamilton men, I took a picture of it. I haven't put it in my notes yet. Good? All right. So, what's next in the notes? All right. Last thing you have in the notes are the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, correct? All right. So, I'm going to do you a favor here. I've got some notes from my regular government class that I'm going to use here in PowerPoint form. You don't write these down. Don't write these down. I'll tell you what to write down. Okay. All right. So remember when I talked about when we declared independence, all the states had to write their constitution. And I've already talked to you about this. Okay. They all were bicameral except for Pennsylvania. They didn't give much power to the governors. They had annual elections. They did not trust government. Okay. Individual rights. So this is kind of important just for general. I'll talk about it again. The state constitutions, most of them had a Bill of Rights in them. This is going to come up later. Okay. They expanded voting rights, which was good. Like, remember, only white male property owners were the ones that got to vote. Now, 5 states allow white male taxpayers to vote. I know that's not a huge leap forward, but it's a leap forward, okay? They had separation of powers, branches of governments, and self-government, okay? So, we need a new constitution. So we're going to have a convention, all right? So this is where we start, okay? Constitution Convention. Write that down. It will be in session from May 25th to September 17th, 1787. Which, by the way, September 17th is Constitution Day. So each of the 13 colonies, or sorry. Each of the 13 states are going to send delegates. Okay? A total of 55. How many delegates? 55. Okay? Now, this is a who's who. Eight of the delegates had signed the Declaration of Independence. Okay? That would have been 11 years earlier. Okay? So, if you look 11 more years, and they're showing up here. 7 had been at the First Continental Congress, which was 1774. And 7 were governors of their states. This convention is going to last 3 months. Okay, we're sending Laura Kelly to D.C. or Philly. We'll go to Philly. Okay? Sending Laura Kelly to Philly for 3 months. The lieutenant governor is going to have to be in charge because this is a really important thing. So people are actually sending their governors. Notables that are there. Ben Franklin is still alive. He's the oldest man in the room. Maybe the second oldest. He's old. Okay. George Washington will leave Mount Vernon again. When he walks in the room, everybody knows who he is. Not everybody knows Alexander Hamilton, but he'll be a delegate from New York. Who's not there? We know where Jefferson is, right? Patrick Henry. Oh, Patrick Henry. Who's Virginian? He's not going. He's invited. Oh, they invite him. But he's not going. Any idea why? He likes the old Constitution. He wants Virginia to be in charge of Virginia. He doesn't want a national government that's going to control Virginia. He is worried about this. In fact, he's going to be the largest opponent, the most outspoken opponent of this new Constitution. And we have to thank him for that. Okay? Because he's going to hold these people accountable. So that they don't form a government that's going to put tyranny on us. Now, Washington brings what's called gravitas to this convention. Have you guys heard that word before, gravitas? Been one of your vocab words for English yet? Okay. I'm gonna explain this word to you and why it's part of the political science lexicon today. The year was 2000. George W. Bush was running for president. He didn't know who he was going to choose as his running mate, his VP. Okay? Wish we didn't talk about the debate. Maybe I'll stop a couple minutes early to talk about the debate. Did we talk about the debate? No. Okay. How many of you guys watched some of the VP debate? Okay, good. Anyhow, so he put somebody in charge of the search committee for his VP. That person he put in charge was Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney had served in the Nixon administration, been in Congress, been Secretary of State. He's done a lot of things. And he was friends with Bush's father. And so he's looking at all these people for his running mate. And Dick Cheney realizes the best person for that job is Dick Cheney, the guy he put in charge of the search. And so when they announced Dick Cheney as Bush's running mate, on CNN, there was a commentator, a talking head in a box of TV, talking head that said, Dick Cheney brings gravitas to the Bush ticket. See, Bush was the governor of Texas. That's a pretty big state, yeah? But the governor of Texas, under their constitution, doesn't have much power compared to other governors. So they kind of talked about, well, he didn't have a lot of power in Texas, that kind of thing. But Dick Cheney, he brings gravity. He brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the ticket that Bush doesn't have. That was on CNN at 11 a.m. At 11:15 on ABC News. Dick Cheney brings gravitas. Fox News, gravitas. MSNBC, gravitas. Dick Cheney. Saturday Night Live, gravitas. I mean, like, everybody starts using this word that nobody's ever heard of. All these news commentators. It's like they just discovered a new word. And everybody was using it. Weeks. So Saturday Night Live did a skit on it. Because it was funny. Now, everybody in my generation knows what gravitas is. Now you do. Okay. So, when somebody of substance, mass, weight, authority walks into the room, bring gravitas. That's George Washington. He brings so much legitimacy to this convention. Okay, so it's important. So why don't we put him in charge? Okay? So he is going to be the chairman of the Constitution Convention. James Madison, become known as the father of the Constitution. Little James Madison. Okay? Who's the nerdiest kid in the school? Okay? That's James Madison. Doesn't play any sports, just reads lots of books. Okay? He's a bookworm. Madison, by the age of 12, was studying things that we would study in graduate school today. Okay? He spoke multiple languages. He was educated. He was homeschooled. He was educated by some very smart people. And so he's a good fit here. Like John Adams, Madison considered becoming a pastor before he got into politics. I mean, John Adams really didn't want to get into politics, but he wound up there. Okay. We 35? This class is 35? Okay. So, 55 men, Philadelphia, 3 months, summer of 1787. Okay. The hottest summer, 30 years in Philadelphia. There's no air conditioning. Now, why did they call Madison the father of the Constitution? Anybody remember this? Now, you got the Articles of Confederation. We're either going to fix it or we're going to scrap it and start over. They realized within the first few days that we need to scrap it, start over. So who's got a plan? Who's got an idea for a new government? Madison does. Where's he from? Where's he from? Virginia, what's the name of his plan?
Virginia plan.
Ah, Virginia plan. Now I picked this baby up. This Madison saw a bunch of his writings in the History Book Club a couple decades ago, and here's the full text of the Virginia plan. Okay, we're going to learn it. Now, does anybody remember there's a competing plan? A competing plan to the Virginia plan from another state. Come on, honor students. You learned this last year. Yes, you did. You learned this in the 8th grade. You got the Virginia plan and name a state.
Massachusetts.
No.
The West Virginia.
Connecticut. New Jersey.
The New Jersey plan.
Good job, Caleb.
Had to be north.
Jeez. Well, we're not there yet. We got to write this Constitution first. Okay. Now, this is Madison's handwriting. Okay. This is the Virginia plan. Now, listen. I know some of you were very bored by it. Okay. But these are important principles that we're talking about with our country. You should know our history. You should know this. Okay? Why we have the form of government we have. If we don't know why, then it's easy just to take it away and change it for no good reason. Listen, these men are smarter than Barack Obama. They're smarter than Donald Trump. They're smarter than Joe Biden or Chuck Schumer or AOC. For goodness sakes, pay attention to what these people are saying. They're well read. They know history. They've studied humankind, our own behavior. A lot of them are godly men. You listen to these politicians today, they're clueless. Most of them are clueless. Okay? All right, sorry. Maybe I should have started with that. See you guys.